Soulful Sauna, Stories of Self-Mastery. Thank you for joining us. It is you, the viewer, that makes this podcast. Your host, Juliette Noske, and her guests are here to share stories of self-mastery, to inspire you and ignite the power of positive change on your own journey. Thank you for being with us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soulful Sauna podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Bridget Finklaire. She is an English-born author, a spiritual teacher, a professional psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and trauma specialist, as well as energy healer. Previously, she was working in London's Harley Street before moving to Cape Town, South Africa in 2012. And her novel, Red Dress, was published by John Hunt Publishing in 2021. It follows Katy, a career mum whose busy and successful life is not all it seems. With trepidation and humour, she embarks on a spiritual path of awakening, very in line with our podcast here. And Bridget created the Bone Circle training in 2017. This is a life-changing quest that gives you all the tools you need to create your soul's purpose work. And weaving Bridget's spiritual and professional paths together, it addresses the mind, the body, the spirit, the past, the present, and the future. So, Bridget, welcome. Lovely to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Juliette, for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. It's always interesting when somebody reads your bio, isn't it? You go, is that me? So, yeah, and it is me.
Yeah. So would you like to share with the audience where we met?
Yeah, sure. So Juliette and I met on a training course in 2012, so it's a long time ago now, hey, where we went on a course called The Transformation, which was to teach us how to tap into intuition and create from our intuitive sat-nav, if you like. So that's how we met. It's quite an intensive course, wasn't it? Because we all got to know each other very well. First of all, it was residential, so we were all kind of hanging out together all the time. And it's one of those courses where you end up getting people to know people, warts and all. So I think it's formed very strong bonds with the people that did that training.
Yes, I have a very strong memory of the garden as well, and the huge chess set. Do you remember? They had a huge chess set in the garden. It's fantastic. And what led you to be on the transformational journey?
On the transformation training itself,
on
or
the training
transformational journey?
Yeah, well, yeah, there was a combination question there. So
I think my whole life is about transformation, and that's been ongoing forever when I look back, but particularly probably from the time I left home, and then very forcefully in my 30s. But in terms of that particular training, it's a really funny reason. There's no real reason, actually, by the way. I just had got to the point in my life where I was extremely stressed. I was going through quite a traumatic period of my life. I was going through a very, very acrimonious divorce from my ex and looking after my 2 teenage children single-handedly and working in Harley Street as a therapist. Plus, I'd had this quite long spiritual journey of awakening and understanding. And I'd got to the point where I work even now with the Academy for Future Sciences work, namely and most profoundly the Keys of Enoch, but there are other books and teachings within the Academy, and they are such high teachings, and I just thought, you know, I've got to where I need to get. There's nothing else for me to learn. I'm fed up with going on personal development courses, spiritual development courses, professional development courses as a therapist. All I need is the Keys of Enoch. I don't really need anything else. I'm not going to waste my time on anything else. I'm not going to waste my money on anything else. And besides which, I was completely burning out and with no time And then magically this course lands, and it's like, oh, okay. Upstairs, as I like to say, is guiding us constantly. And I was definitely guided to that course. It started off with a very dear friend of mine. I've lost contact with her now, unfortunately, but a very dear friend of mine at the time who was extremely intuitive and psychic, really, who was a healer. She sent me an email one day, and she always used to start off every email, and then she'd go into the email. And she started the email and she said, you need to go to the Yes group in London at this hotel on a Wednesday night. And I thought, I don't want to do that. Wednesday night is my only evening that I don't see clients. Sometimes I don't see them on a Friday, but that's Friday night. You're going to do, you know, relax or chill or go out. So I did. The last thing I wanted to do was used up my Wednesday night by going back into town to go to a hotel to go to this thing. And the Yes group is very much oriented towards Tony Robbins, and it wasn't really my thing. It wasn't where I was at. I didn't want to go. I was tired, burnt out, miserable. I wanted to have a nice quiet evening in, having a bath or go to bed early. And actually something in me knew I had to go because it was from her. And she was so spot on with her information. So I kind of dragged myself to this Yes group meeting. And our mutual friend, Ryan Pinnock, who was involved in that training at the time, was sitting at the back of that hall and was promoting that particular training. Now, I didn't sit anywhere near him. I didn't know him. I was right at the other side of the hall. But what happened is they had the air conditioning on, really cold. And I'm a really chilly mortal. I always said I should go and live in a warm climate, which is why I'm now in Africa. But I was really cold, and I was sitting there with my coat on thinking, I am shivering, I'm freezing, I need to move. So as soon as I had the opportunity, I got up and I moved and I moved. I looked around and I could see that there were these air vents in the ceiling of this place. And the only place where there wasn't one was right near the back, near this table where Ryan was. So I stationed myself there. And then in the break, he said, we're offering 20 free tickets for Call to Greatness, which was, the, as you know, Juliette, the kind of introductory weekend for the transformation. So I thought, oh, well, I wouldn't mind going. So I don't know, I got there, I was right near there, and I kind of just turned back and said, oh, I'd like to go. And he said, okay. Now, my diary in those days was chocker. There's no way that I would have had any time in my diary to do anything. It was ridiculous. And I looked in my diary, and the weekend that it was on was the only weekend that was free for the rest of that year. So I thought, okay, you know, you have to look at these synchronicities in life. I'm meant to go. So off I go. And by the end, and it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and by the end of Saturday, I knew I had to do the whole flipping training. I'd already researched it and looked at, you know, what the training was about, and I'd already decided I don't need this. But by the end of Saturday, it was like, no, I know I need to do this. And I went home and did have a long hot bath and sort of thought through it. Thought this is going to cost me a lot of money and a lot of time. I don't have any time, and I'm exhausted and I'm burning out. What the heck am I doing? But I absolutely knew I had to go. And that's really the hallmark of intuition, isn't it? That it's an absolute knowing. It's not always comfortable, by the way. It's not always what you would choose to do, but it's a knowing. So it wasn't a conscious decision to go and do that training. It was more like a conscious decision to not do any more trainings, and then that one popping up and me going, no, I know I've got to do this. And I'm actually really grateful that I did it.
Yes. Synchronicities have definitely guided me as well, and I completely resonate with that. And I'm sure the audience out there, if they start to look in their lives, can begin to see those breadcrumbs that guide us. And so, yeah. So what led you then to move country? So you said the hot weather obviously enticed you, but yeah, tell us more.
But it wasn't as simple as that. But I love what you were saying about follow the breadcrumbs, and that's exactly true. And actually, I illustrate that in that novel Red Dress, where the protagonist, Katy, is doing exactly that. She's following the synchronicities and the breadcrumbs as she awakens to a different journey and becomes aware of herself. So just wanted to park that off while you talked about that. But going back to coming to Africa, well, it was really a result of that training. I had never been to South Africa in my life, and I had never thought of even travelling here, let alone living here. I think I used to know a few South African friends, and they always used to say, why don't you go to the garden route? You'd love the garden route. But you have to come here in our summer, which is now, which is December, January, February. So it never really worked because I had children and they were at school, and you always want to go away in the school holidays, which is sort of July and August. So it didn't really happen. I just dismissed it. My brother had some connections with South Africa because his wife had some family here, and he'd been here. He's a wine buff, and he was familiar with all the wine farms. And he used to say, oh, it's a great place to go. And it just never interested me. I always loved London from being a small child, and I've always loved traveling, but I've loved traveling in Europe, America, not South Africa. So during the course of that 9-month training, it became obvious that I needed to come to South Africa. At the beginning, I thought that was a holiday. So I looked in my diary, and the only space that was free was July. And I thought, I'm not going then, it's the middle of winter. And it is pretty hectic in the winter. It can get very cold, it can snow, and there's no central heating. So I thought, I'm not going then. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go in October at the end of the training. So I just marked off 3 weeks in my diary so that I wouldn't book clients in, so that I could go off on holiday to South Africa. And that was in about the February, because that training started in January, didn't it? And it ended in September. So that was in the January. Well, by I think it was maybe February, well, by about April, it was becoming clear that I wasn't just going to go to South Africa on holiday. I was going to go there for a longer period. And at the end of that training, what was obvious and what became clear intuitively was pack up your bags, rent up your flat, give up Harley Street and go to South Africa. It was probably one of the most scary things I've ever done. My heart was thumping at the end, thinking, I'm throwing away my life, I'm destroying my life. I've spent all this time getting to the point of building up my career as a top Harley Street therapist with a waiting list. My children were about to go to university and drama school, respectively. So I would have had freedom. I would not have been so stressed. All I really wanted to do was see fewer clients and take time out for myself. And all of a sudden, it's like, no, you're going off to South Africa. And I remember crying at the end of that course, saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I think I've completely screwed up my life. And I remember being told, yes, but that's your heart. That's what you love. And I said, how can you be so naive and stupid? How do I know I love South Africa? I've never been there. I love London. But I had to test it out. I'm one of those people who tests things out. I had to test out, does this stuff really work? And I'm never going to know if it works or not unless I go. So I did it. I packed up, I resigned from Harley Street. It took me about 6 months, the 6-month resignation period. Had to sew up loose ends with all of my clients or get them to other therapists, get my children installed in university, rent out my flat, get rid of about 80% of what I owned, put a small amount of stuff in storage and left some furniture in the flat, and that was it. And I packed a suitcase and got on an aeroplane and came here. And
Wow.
that was 12 years ago. So that was 12 years ago and I'm still here. At the time, I think I bought a flight where I was going back for Christmas, and I thought, if I don't like it, there's various other options and things I can do while I'm renting out my flat for a year. I could travel anywhere. I could rent a smaller flat in London. I could go and live in the country. The world would be my oyster if I don't like it. But actually I did like it, so I came back. And in that 12 years, I've met my husband, who's South African, married my husband, and I've built a house in not in Cape Town, in a place called Hout Bay, which is on the Cape, just 20 minutes drive from Cape Town. So I now have my South African ID, I now have my South African driving license, and I'm here. And I love it. And I love it in a way that I never thought I would. And I love it in a way that I never loved England. The whole countryside and the energy of the land here sings to me and sings to my soul. And I think I've probably had many past lives here. Well, I know I've had some, I know of some of them. It feels as though probably my soul began here. A lot of people began in Africa, and it has to be here now as we go through these different changing times. So I've come back home in a kind of strange way. Yeah.
Wonderful. And can you tell us how does some of this feed into your book, and when did you know that you had to write that book? What were the beginnings, the seedling? When did you plant the seed of your book, Red Dress?
Okay, so first of all, me coming to Africa has got nothing to do with the book. The book is set in London. what happened is, again, intuition. Intuition. It'll tell you things you don't want to do. I'm not one of those people who's always said, oh, I've got a book in me, I'm going to write a book. I'm not that person. And through a series of intuitive tune-ins and tap-ins and intuitive insights, shall we say, I was being guided and guided and guided more and more to write a book. And I didn't know what that book was going to be about, and I thought perhaps it would be a non-fiction book around personal development, spiritual development, because I'd been on that path for a very long time, for sort of like 20 odd, now 30 odd years. But actually, I kind of kept putting it off. There were all sorts of signs. When I first found out I needed to write a book, just afterwards, somebody knocked on my door. I'd just moved to South Africa. I didn't know anybody. Somebody knocked on my door. It was a neighbour from across the road saying, hi, welcome to the hood. I'm your neighbour. My wife's birthday tonight. Would you like to come for a braai, which is a kind of a barbecue? And I went, yeah, sure. So I rock up with my bottle of wine. And it turns out that the wife is an author, and everybody there is either in publishing, creative writing teaching, an author. I'm surrounded by literary world. And I'm thinking, this is a sign, okay. But anyway, it dragged on for a while, and eventually I had to let go of resistance and just start. And I literally did not know what I was going to write. And I went into a meditative space, and I just got this voice, okay, open your eyes and start typing. And so I did. And that was the beginning of Red Dress. And I kind of went for a walk on the beach afterwards and thought, well, I can't call the character after the person I'd just been talking to, a friend of mine. I thought, no, God, she's got to have her own name. This is very much like my life. Do I need to change this? And thought, no, it's a story. It is a fiction. Some of the events in Red Dress and some of the things in Red Dress are part autobiographical. So it's partly sort of me 15, 20 years ago, but also it's not me. And there's other characters in the book that are me. So for example, she sees a Harley Street therapist, and he is a man. That's part of him is me. She has a very best friend called Shanti. Part of Shanti is me. So it's like parts of my character and parts of my journey are within the story, but there's also a heck of a lot which is total fiction. So it just kept evolving from there, and eventually I'd written it after about 2 years. And then the next big hurdle is finding a publisher. And I knew I didn't want to self-publish, I wanted a publisher. And the series of magic enabled me to find my publisher. And the publisher said, we love your writing, we love the story, but it's not really structured as a novel, so you need to rewrite it. So it took me another 2 years to rewrite it as a novel, so that there's tension and page turners and there's funny bits as well, and it's light, and it's, you know, it's a proper novel. You get, I don't know if you've read it, Juliette, but you can get pulled into it. A lot of people love it. They think it's a real page turning. But what I really wanted to do through that book was to highlight and illustrate through story an alternative way of being, which is to awaken and become aware to a more spiritual journey. Because the protagonist, Katy, she's having a really successful life. She's got a big house, she's got 2 kids who are at good school, she's got a big, nice, expensive luxury car, she's got money, she's doing well, but she's not fulfilled and she is not happy. And something inside her has died. She's lost who she is and what she wants and what makes her tick. And everything has become numb and flat. And it's just showing that what we think is successful isn't always what it's trumped up to be. And that those markers of success are often what society says, you ought to do this, you should do this. And actually that's not true. And so the whole story is her awakening to something more, to who she really is, to what her life is really about. So there's actually lots of spiritual, and so she embarks on a spiritual journey, but she does it with trepidation, so she's quite self-deprecating, and there's lots of funny bits in it. But she is showing you as the reader what's possible if you want to take that kind of journey to find a more fulfilling life that's more meaningful and has more purpose. So it's a teaching tale, but it's a fun book as well at the same time. Because I think a lot of teaching tales are non-fiction books, and you've got to plow through those. And I wanted something that somebody could just sit on the plane or sit on the beach or whatever. And we don't get much time these days to read novels. I think most people are scrolling through social media, or we're reading articles online, or we're reading non-fiction. So I really wanted it to be a fun read for people that they can just really, really enjoy. And if they just want to take away the story and have a laugh, that's fine. But if they want to delve deeper, a lot of the things, well, every spiritual thing that she does is a true and real thing that the reader can go and do.
Yes, and the way that she develops her meditation practice, and like you say, she listens to the guidance from upstairs, and she follows the breadcrumbs, and yeah. And I think that's also, I guess, one of the things that has come out of you moving to South Africa, because although it is set in London, like you said, it was birthed once you'd moved to South Africa. And one of the things actually in there, which really I also do as well, is the soul contract reading. And I don't think I knew that about you before, actually, before reading the book, that you'd had your soul. Was it you? Did you actually have your soul contract reading, or was that one of the fictional parts?
I actually, it's one of the parts that's true. I really did have a soul contract reading, and her soul contract reading is pretty much mine. So
Right.
it's one of the pieces that's true, because it would have been so difficult to make that completely different and construct something completely different. It kind of had to be that to make sense with the story. And of course, there's a sequel as well, which, so you'll see more about how she gets there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was also what resonated with me was when you said how that the world is a big training ground. But you also mentioned how, and this is obviously possibly from your therapeutical background, because I obviously I studied psychology and coaching as well, how people copy people. And so although it is a big training ground, we're also just copying each other if we don't become aware, I guess, and then change that. And someone was saying just the other day that, about their children and helping them grow up, but children don't do what you say, they do what you do.
Yes, they
Yeah.
do. Yeah. So yeah, that's right. We're kind of going round in circles in many ways. Even with reincarnation, we haven't learnt that lesson, so we've come back again. And the path of liberation is to wake up. Otherwise, you're just in that sausage machine.
Yeah.
Or the cookie cutter machine.
Yeah. So as I look at you there, you're in a lovely sauna, and we spoke about this briefly before, but tell me, do you have a sauna story?
I don't really. I kind of had to rack my brains. Have I got an interesting sauna story? But I'm not a big sauna fan. I tend to go to saunas to detox. And whenever I've been in a sauna, I've been on my own in that sauna. And I used to do yoga in the sauna because I could be extremely bendy and flexible in a sauna because it's warm. But I think for me, what's nice about a sauna is I'm often am there on my own. So it gives me chance to go within and reflect, because there's nobody else to talk to very often. People don't go in the sauna. They tend to prefer the other more interesting bits of the spa, like having a massage or being in the jacuzzi. So I think it gives you time to go inwards and reflect, and that's probably a really powerful thing. But as I was saying to you, Juliette, I love hot tubs outside and being in nature, and I'm really glad that we're in a sauna with a tree that's behind there. And that is a different vibe for me, because if you're in a hot tub or a jacuzzi, you can stay in for ages. Whereas a sauna, you can only stay in for a few minutes. After 5 to 10 minutes, you had enough, you have to come out. Whereas in a jacuzzi, you can sit there for an hour or 2 or 3 with a glass of something and some good friends. And I've certainly had some fabulous times in jacuzzis, outside jacuzzis with friends and family, just laughing and giggling and getting to know each other. But I think for the sauna, it's the going within and reflecting, the self-reflection, having time to press pause, because there's nothing else you can really, well, unless you do yoga, there's nothing else that you really do in a sauna. You're just going to sit there or lie there in the heat, surviving it.
Yeah.
So I think reflection.
Yeah. And that resonates with what you mentioned about in your book about meditation. And would you say that's a key thing that you do in your own life as well? That time for stillness and silence.
I think stillness and silence is the single most important thing I've ever done or ever learned. So I learned into year 2000, so 24 years of meditating now. And actually just prior to that, my kids were still quite young then. And I was at home, you know, doing housework as a mother does, you know, tidying up the place and doing whatever you do. And kids at school, but they're coming back soon. And I worked part-time. And I remember hearing something on Radio 4 about a coach. Now, in those days, a coach was either like a bus you got on, or it was somebody who trained footballers. That idea of coaching in those days, 24 years ago, was really new, and it had just come in from America. So I pricked up my ears and thought it was a really interesting conversation. And at the end, I think the interviewer said, if the one single thing that people can take away that would improve their lives, what it would be, and she went, meditation. So I thought, right, okay, let's have a look. So I started meditating then. And although I've done, I don't know, countless trainings and read countless books and been on countless courses and all kinds of spiritual things, for me, stillness and meditation is the key that unlocks everything else, because that's how you become aware. Because you don't see what's in your shadow. You don't see what's playing out. We are hugely conditioned. People are hugely conditioned by their childhood. And that all becomes unconscious or subconscious. And this is really the root of therapy. And you can sometimes see how that's playing out, but you can't see what it is. You can't, there's that saying that when you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label. So you don't know what's going on and playing out inside of you that keeps you on that treadmill and that sausage machine or that cookie cutter of just learning from other people and repeating, repeat, 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 repeat. But when you go into silence, that's when you start to be able to still the monkey mind. You start to become still in your body and your mind. And then things rise up for you to be aware of. Because unless you are aware of something, you can't actually change it. You don't know it's there, you're going to carry on. So I think it's a profound practice. And if people are on a path of self-awareness or self-awakening or self-realization or self-love, or just on some kind of spiritual path looking for something more than ordinary life, I think stillness or meditation of some form is key. Now, I know some people find it very difficult to sit still, but you can do things like Tai Chi and Qigong, which is a moving meditation.
Yes, I also interviewed a Sufi whirler, so you can do your whirling too.
Can do your whirling. It doesn't make you feel sick.
Yeah.
I'd rather sit still personally.
So you spoke briefly there about being a therapist, and because obviously when you become a therapist, you receive your own therapy. When would you say your own journey of self-mastery, awareness and awakening began? Was it that time when you started looking into therapy, or was it way before that?
I think this is a really interesting question, and it's not always easy to go back and pinpoint that turning point. I think for some it is. For some people, they have like a sudden wake-up call, like they'll have some terrible trauma or an accident or terrible illness, and that causes them to wake up. But that wasn't the case in my case. And I think as well with self-mastery, there's kind of two sides of the coin, because we live in a duality. And so on one side of the coin, it's self-mastery. You could look at it as in a negative way of saying it's about, you know, watching what you think and feel and taking a step back and observing. And I think that began in my childhood because my parents expected me to be a certain way and behave a certain way and say things in a certain way and not express upset. So they would not like me to cry if I was upset, even as a small child. So I had to become extremely aware very early on of what my emotions and thoughts and feelings were and what I wanted to do, and double check it before doing it to check it was going to be in alignment with what my parents wanted. Now that is a very negative, conditioned way of being self-masterful. And the true journey is much more about self-awareness, self-realization and self-love. And that for me probably began in earnest when I had my own children. So at the age of 30 I had my daughter, and that made me stop work. And interesting, because you know, when I stopped work in England and came to Africa, I had time to think about writing a book and becoming a spiritual teacher and creating the Bone Circle as well. So the whole life changed. I did not have time to do that. And similarly, when I gave up work, which at the time, by the way, I was working in public relations, when I gave up my work in public relations to have children, that gave me breathing space, time, stillness to reflect, and also to reflect particularly on how I wanted to be as a mother. And that made me realise there was a bit of a disparity going on between my own childhood and how my own parents were and how they were as role models, and what I wanted to do as a compassionate person. I wanted to be the best version of me I could be and the best mother I could be to them and be of service to them. And so that made me realise there were a few bones buried and I didn't really know what they were. And so I ended up going for therapy myself. I went to see a counsellor, actually. She was very good, very old school. Coming towards a retirement, they're normally the best. They've got lots of experience. And it was great. And I went to see her sort of every week for 2 years to kind of start to unravel what was going on. Now, at the same time, this whole kind of spiritual journey arose because I was working part-time doing feng shui work, and also space clearing work and dealing with energies and learning Qigong and Tai Chi. I didn't start learning yoga until later. And so there was this dual pathway of this spiritual awakening and curiosity about there being more than our five senses. And at the same time, there was this weekly hour with this counsellor where I could explore what was going on. And that led me to then train as a therapist myself. A different type of therapy. I didn't do counselling. But you're absolutely right in saying, and I don't think everybody realises this, but most people who become psychologists or therapists, really, they're looking to fix or resolve or heal something within themselves. And that the clients they have are mirroring something. And when they've resolved it, that sort of client will disappear and they get a different type of client. And I think that by the end of my career as a therapist, I had got to the point where I had healed and resolved and understood so much that I no longer needed to do it. Although every so often I'm called to, and I do. And that doesn't mean I don't continue to work on myself, because I do. And I have the tools to do that, which I'm very blessed and privileged to have and grateful for. So yes, you do work on yourself. So that was a whole journey, but there was always this parallel journey of the sort of the therapy, the psychotherapy, the hypnotherapy, the working with the mind and the psyche, the psychology of life, and the spiritual, and they went hand in hand. There were parallel paths that I kept separate for a very long time, until at some point they started to coalesce and come together and intertwine and interweave. And so I became more alternative as a therapist, working much more energy-based. Yeah, so it's been an interesting path. And I think that was really what started the self-awareness.
Yes. I've heard from some avenues that often, because the way that we look at maybe mental health issues can be in quite a negative way, but I've heard from various avenues that sometimes a mental health issue that kind of comes up can often be an awakening, a moment of awakening. What's your view on that? Because you talked about how your therapy and your spiritual work kind of came closer and closer until they interwove. So yes, I'd love to hear your view on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are many things that trigger people into an awakening. I have a friend, dear friend even now, who had an awakening because he was literally out somewhere with his girlfriend, and literally this kind of feeling, this light came down into his body, and he said it was just like pure unconditional love, and it just blew his heart open. And he just literally overnight gave up drinking alcohol, gave up illicit street drugs, gave up meat, became vegetarian, just lived a clean life, and just that started his journey. I've known of people who've had a car crash, it started it, or have had a cancer scare, or any kind of illness that started it. And I think mental health can be a huge step towards a spiritual path, because a lot of people who are on a spiritual path are pushed there because they had a difficult beginning. So a lot of people ended up having ACEs, adverse childhood events, in their childhood growing up, which has caused them deep wounding. And then in searching for the solution to that wounding, they find a spiritual path. And it's not for everybody. And as a therapist, every so often, I would always deal, by the way, I had various specialisms, and one of which was trauma. And I always had at least one client, usually two and possibly three, who I would call a hole in the soul client, who had major stuff going on. Not just, let's just sit and talk about this and unpack it, but major traumatic stuff going on. And nearly all of them went through a period of therapy and healing, and then went on to a spiritual path. So it does give people the opportunity to take that spiritual path in order to heal, because somehow the only way to heal that is to transcend above it. It's too scarred to heal it completely with therapy. It's a lifelong journey of healing, but it does allow that path to open up. Having said that, not everybody takes that path. Somebody else who's got mental, emotional, adverse events in their childhood, for example, or mental emotional problems, might say turn to drugs or turn to crime or something, some other path. But I think it's probably there to jolt the soul into seeking for love, really, and self-love.
Yeah. Yeah, you also you spoke about how your clients mirror you. And I remember experiencing that in the beginning of my coaching training, and when I became aware of what was going on. And I found that fascinating. And so over the years, did you notice like the phases of like the client sitting in front of you, and what you yourself were working on?
Yes, I did. And I mean, at the beginning, I just used to think, why am I getting so many people with this same thing? And they're all completely different. And then I would realize there was something in me. Now, it might be a big glaring thing, or it might just be a small thing. It might be, for example, they presented with depression and I didn't have depression, but the thing that was causing their depression was something that I might have had. And I started to realize it fairly early on, and certainly towards the end of my career as a therapist, in the last sort of 5 years of being a therapist, I was extremely aware of it. And somebody would sit in the chair opposite me and say, you know, whatever, and I'd think, oh yeah, that's me. and I'd go, okay, I'll just do this therapy for myself as well as you. I remember right at the end, before resigning, I had 3 people who were so stressed out they were about to burn out. I had one of those super teachers who'd taken on some dreadful school somewhere in some godforsaken part of London and was so burnt out she couldn't even get to the sessions. And I had another person who was so burnt out she'd sort of fall asleep in the chair talking to me. And I had a third one, I can't remember who the third one was, but I remember the 2 very easily and clearly. I think there was another one who worked in the city who had to take a break because they were burning out. And it's like, okay, I get the message. So yeah, they do. It's not always obvious, you know, somebody's presenting with, say, anorexia. It doesn't mean you've got anorexia. I did used to work with eating disorders, but it probably means that you have got some kind of eating stuff going on, control stuff going on, or something like that. So or it might be that that was triggered by something else, or it's all about control in their life, and you realize that's also you're controlling things in your life. So there is a mirroring, and again that comes out, I think, in Red Dress, when she's also a Harley Street therapist and a lot of her clients are mirroring her.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for any new therapists out there who are training in therapy?
Oh my goodness. I think your clients train you better than any training can train you. So you've got to have the training in the first place, obviously. But what happens in the therapy room, those are your 10,000 hours that hone your skills as a therapist. And so just start off with something you feel able to handle and work with, and just do your best. That's all you can do, is do your best. And you will likely make mistakes along the way. And if you've got a good supervisor, they'll help you with that and reflect back to you. And don't beat yourself up about that, because nobody is perfect. Just grow from it, learn from it, grow from it. And what I also would say is many therapists are taught one particular model, like one model fits all. And actually it doesn't, because we are all different and we are all traumatized in different ways and we all respond in different ways. And some people are going to respond to brief solution focused therapy or NLP, and some other people need regression, or they need to work with EMDR or EFT or trauma therapy. So everybody's different and everybody responds differently, and everybody has a different reason why they're presenting with whatever it is. So to just be open-minded and continue to do continuing professional development, because there are lots of techniques out there. And if you've got a toolbox with lots of different tools in it, you can normally get around resistance, because resistance is a huge thing in therapy. Oh, every client is resistant. Yes, they probably are resistant, but there's probably a tool that gets around that resistance. In fact, there's always a tool that gets around that resistance. But if you say, no, I'm just this therapist and all I do is, say, REBT therapy or CBT therapy, or all I do is, I don't know, psychodynamic, then you're not always going to be able to get around the resistance of your client. So be open-minded to other ways and other approaches of working. Be gentle on yourself. Make sure you've got a good supervisor to offload, and learn from the things that you feel, I could have done that better. I'm not saying, I don't think people make mistakes as much, but they feel, oh, I could have done that better, or I shouldn't have said that, or I should have said that in another way, or I should have actually just kept my mouth shut and listened to them talk, or whatever. But you learn that along the way. You've got your structure of your training, but all the details get learnt along the way. So be open-minded and learn from each client how you can improve yourself.
Yes. That reminds me, the other day, I teach a community Pilates class for a mix of Bangladeshi, Persian women. And it was the beginning of term. And for some reason, one person turned up. And one of my mentors always told me, even if there's one person, that one person then, they reach thousands of other people during their lifetime. So really, you're not just teaching one person, and always give your best, whether it's one or whether it's 50. And it was really funny because I'd taken my shamanic drum that I made along, and one of the ladies had asked me to bring it, but she wasn't there that week. And so I did the Pilates class with the lady, and then we were talking a bit throughout the session, and she mentioned something, and I just was like, like you say, those upstairs said, get the drum out, because I'd brought it there for the relaxation. I was like, okay, lie down here. So I played the drum over her for like 10-15 minutes. And then someone came in, so we were disturbed. So I stopped and then just sat down next to her. And then she started talking, and we were talking, and it was amazing because she was like, what I'm about to tell you, I've never told anyone. She said, I'm a therapist and I work with clients all the time. But what I'm about to tell you, I've never told anyone. And she told me this information, and it was a huge breakthrough for her. And she said, you keep drumming. And
So awesome.
yeah. And it's like you say, you know, when you learn the skills and the tools, and then it's that weaving together and listening to your intuition, listening to your guidance. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm working with a client, it's like, where did that come from? And it's almost you're channeling, you're it's coming in, and it's the session is for you as well, just as much as it is for the person in front of you.
Absolutely. And I just love that. You always show up because there's usually a reason why there was only that one person there and you had to take your drum that week. There's always all of these things that we don't see, which is being coordinated, if you like, by a higher intelligence. And that's what then comes through us as inspiration. That happens to me all the time if I'm teaching, and also when you're writing. It just happens to you. Just suddenly you've written a whole sentence, you think, where the heck did that come from? So yeah, you've got to keep open to that information. And I absolutely agree. You show up. Doesn't matter if any one person's turned up. You show up because you just don't know what you might get from it, what the other person gets from it, how that ripples out, that ripple effect.
Yes. In your book, there is obviously the relationship between Katy and her husband, and it's, you know, it's got to a stage where they're very disconnected in many ways. And it's like in life where we look upon maybe someone in their relationship or in their life, and we think they are successful, and we have an image of them being successful, and then all of a sudden, you know, that couple get divorced, or that person has something happen that you find out about. And it's interesting, isn't it, that we have this vision of what people are like, but I often say how we're judging it with our internal turmoil that's going on, and we're looking at kind of more their outer polished veneer. And you spoke about that briefly with your parents, where you've had to put on that veneer a lot more than maybe nowadays people do. You weren't allowed to cry, for example, to show your emotions. And was that a very British upbringing?
Not really, because my parents aren't very British. They're now passed away. I don't. I think it's a big answer actually as to why that was. Going back to what you were saying about other people in the veneer, I think that's the case. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and it's even worse nowadays with social media because everybody looks happy and smiley, and then the next thing you know is they're not happy and smiley, and they're getting divorced or whatever, because people keep stuff close to their heart. They keep it under wraps, don't they? Don't want. I think it's a shame thing. They don't want people to know that their marriage is failing or they're disconnected from their husband, or so they keep the smile on their face, and they put the thing on Facebook, and they pretend, and they create this whole kind of construct and facade, as you said, that everything's okay, and actually it's not behind closed doors. And that's part of the thing for writing the book as well, is that I think many women who've read that book resonate with Katy on some level. And I've had people in reviews saying, I feel like I'm reading my own life story, because it's opened the lid on it and said, hey, this can happen and it's okay and it's normal. So part of becoming self-aware is to dismantle that facade, isn't it? To dismantle the mask and to be more authentic and more real and stand in the truth of who you are.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. My mum had the similar experience where they had to put on a facade. My grandma was very like that. And like you say, it's like that's moved then now to the area of social media. And perhaps that kind of option of hiding behind the mask will always be there. Just in a different way. And it's about us unveiling or revealing or stepping away from all of those masks that we've put on ourselves, and and becoming our true self. And yeah, and that is, I guess, part of the self-mastery journey, like you say, coming out of the sausage factory.
Yeah, waking up and take, it's a bit like what's the film? Sorry, mind gone blank. The Matrix.
The
It's a bit like the
Matrix.
Matrix. We have to wake up from the programming. Yeah, and we've all got that, by the way. So I didn't want to go into too much depth about my parents and sort of, denigrate them too much. I'm grateful for them and I've forgiven them, but we all have our own wounding. So we've all got that facade to some degree. We all have to compensate for what we believe are our shortcomings, which are actually only there because of our parenting or something else that happened or in our early childhood.
Yeah.
So really the essence of therapy, isn't it? To uncover that, to reveal it, and then that brings the power out of it. And you can heal it and move on and see it for what it is.
Yeah. So you said you don't often see therapy clients anymore. However, you are running the amazing Bone Circle training. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that, what that involves?
Yeah, sure. So the Bone Circle, very dear to my heart. I started teaching it in about 2017 in person, and I did it online for a little bit as well, but it was still me live, so to speak. And then I got too sick to really continue doing that and writing. So I wanted to continue the writing and get Red Dress published. And I have been teaching a lot of other stuff and also writing another book. At the beginning of last year, people kept saying, "Oh, will you teach the Bone Circle again? Will you teach it again?" So I started teaching it again, and I got intuitively, and as you know, we listen to those voices, intuitively got, no, don't teach it now. You need to write a non-fiction book about it. And that non-fiction book has enabled me, because I'm in the process of writing it, to absolutely understand it inside out, and it'll be much, much easier for me to teach it at the end of that book. So I'm wanting to get that book finished in the next, well, by the end of this year, hopefully in the next 6 months. And so what the Bone Circle training is taking the areas of expertise, because I've been on this journey for like 30 odd years. So we talked about when did everything change? Well, it was when my daughter was born, and she's nearly 32. So there's an enormous depth and breadth of understanding, both from the perspective of being a therapist and from the spiritual journey and from intuition and creating. And what I wanted to do was weave that together. So the Bone Circle, this is why it addresses past, present, and future. The past informs always your present, which is also creating your future. There's only really the present, and you can change what went on in the past. You can't change actually what happened, but you can change how you react to that and how you respond to that. And that can then change how you are in the present moment, and then also change what you create in the future. It's also mind, body, and spirit. So we're talking with the spiritual practice to awaken your spirit and grow your soul in the light. And if you want to, take you through an ascension process, towards an ascension process. But you don't have to do it for that. It's just awakening, really. And that's lifestyle and spiritual practice that anchors you into being fully present and being more aware, so that you can go on that journey of self-mastery, self-awareness, self-love, self-realization. Then the past is really to do with looking at therapies, but easy ones that I can transmit and teach, and also telling you about other ones that are out there, where you can become aware of that programming from the past and bring it to light and take the power out of it and resolve traumas, and so they're not hooked into you and holding you back anymore. And then the future is really about creating intuitively. And so the Bone Circle is a training. It also becomes a way of life, because you just continue living that way. And it's also a circle of like-minded people. So you have all your circle bodies to work with. And the bones themselves, so there's 18 bones that form the Bone Circle. And they are pearls of wisdom that are strung together, or keys that unlock wisdom. Insights, truth bombs, and the first one is love is the way. So everything starts with love, and that's, you use that truth bomb, that bone, as your foundation for everything else you do. And so it's working with these bones to heal the past, to be fully present, and to create what your soul's come here to create. So it's not just like manifesting or creating that job with that money and that Ferrari or anything like that. It's much more about being in alignment with your own skills, talents, and some of those are going to be hidden gems that you don't know exist. Like I didn't know I could write a book. So it's about really realigning with your skills and talents, what makes your heart sing, what brings you to life, and taking that journey of healing the past and letting go of it and stepping into your full authority and power of who you really are and what you're actually here to do, because we're all here to serve. And we're all here to make this world a little bit of a better place. Even if it's just showing up with one person for Pilates and doing some drumming for them. And that's changed that person's life. So we never really fully see the ripple effect. But if you follow what you love and what's true for you, you will be in service to others and you will be doing what your soul came here to do. And then everything that happened will make sense. So everything that happened in my childhood now makes perfect sense. And I'm internally grateful for the privilege of that childhood. And there's so much I learned from it. And so much that brilliant, positive stuff from my parents. But I had to heal all of that and be present and be on this journey to see it. So that's what the Bone Circle is about. What are you here to do? What makes your heart sing? It's you creating your best life and the best version of you, which is always about self-realization, soul growth, what you're here for. That's what the Bone Circle is. And it's fun. It's life-changing.
And so is it online or is it in person?
So what's going to happen now at the moment, because I'm still kind of recovering from fatigue, from mold poisoning. We were talking about heavy metal poisoning, really severe black mold poisoning. So I've really been exhausted and I'm recovering from that. So I'm focusing on teaching Keys of Enoch, which I do fairly regularly, every week, at least once a week. So I'm focusing up really on my Keys of Enoch work and my own spiritual stuff and writing. But once that book is written, then I will begin to teach it, and it's likely it will be online because I want to reach as many people as possible. And the book will be published in England because it's a UK publisher. So there's no point me doing it in person, stuck here on the tip of Africa. It's much more likely that it will be done online so that anybody from across the world can join. And it will be I think the first modules, it's in 5 modules. The first 3 modules will probably be recorded online that you can tap into. And the final 2 modules, they need to be done in person. So it will be live trainings online. And at some point in the future, it might be that I do some kind of retreat work with that and some kind of personal in-person work where you can come out to Africa and hang out with me. But let's just see how that goes and how my energy levels go and what happens in the world as well, because there's just so much going on right now in this period of time that we're living in or living through. We're living through interesting times.
Yes. And through writing the book, you said that that's really supporting you in how to teach it. Are there any other learnings that you're getting in writing this book about the Bone Circle?
It's really honing my skills in how to put that across to other people and how to teach it. Because to teach something, you have to understand it inside out to be able to teach it well so that it's clear and it lands for people. And so the first part of it was to clarify it. And a friend of mine said, oh, you Fisher-priced it. You've made it easy to understand. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that I still work out how the structure of the thing works. But the second thing is my understanding of just how much I know and how there's too much to go into a book. It would be a huge, it'd be like Encyclopedia Britannica if I just wrote everything I knew about all of these bones and all of these subjects. And I can't possibly do that. So most of it is me filtering stuff out and going, no, they don't need to know that. We can talk about that another time. That's not actually that important. It's interesting, but it's not important. What are the bare bones of what I actually need to say here so that it's clear? Because otherwise you go down rabbit holes with things particularly if you do have a very broad base of understanding and learning. There's so many different things that it's exciting to share, and they think, no, the reader's going to get overwhelmed. So it's a matter of like pulling it down, trying to make it manageable and interesting, and something that people are excited about and want to do. So that's what the writing of the book is teaching me.
Mm. And did you say it's a novel or it's a training?
No, it's a non-fiction. It's a non-fiction. So the Bone Circle. Yeah, so the Red Dress is a novel. The Bone Circle is a non-fiction, and it's telling you how to do all this stuff, basically, but in a lovely way, and a fun way. And it's stringing together these pearls of wisdom, but really going deeply, because really higher truths have 7 levels, and we've got to try and get those 7 levels. So it's not like just skimming the surface, but really diving deeply to understand at a deep level how these things work and putting those into practice. So the Bone Circle is a non-fiction. And then I've also got the sequel to Red Dress, which is a fiction, which is sort of a third written, and I had to shelve it for a while just because of energy and time. So I got guided to write the Bone Circle first. So once the Bone Circle is written, that will go off to the publisher. It takes about 9 months to actually be published, because there's a whole load of background stuff that has to happen with the publisher. And in that 9 months, the first thing is that I'll start organising the actual trainings. And then the second thing is that I can start pick up the sequel to Red Dress and write that. In fact, there could be 2 sequels. I think it's going to be part of a trinity. So there's the second book, and then there'll be a third one. Yeah, so I've got my work cut out. And then there's part of me's going, yeah, but I'm getting older, I want to retire a little bit and rest. But I don't think that's going to happen, because I think upstairs is going, no, you've got more to do yet. You've got a lot to share with the world. And so that's my focus at the moment, is to share wisdom that I have gained over the 62 years of my life, but particularly over the 32 years of that journey of awakening, to begin to share that with others so they can take their own journey and to get that out into the world. You know, I go to a lot of, last year I went to London actually to go to TCCHE conference. It was great. There was lots of people there, really lovely speakers. I actually went because Doctors Hertak were there, who are the Keys of Enoch and the Academy for Future Science. So I was with them, and you know, it was great to be there, and it was lovely, and I enjoyed every speaker. But I kept thinking, oh, I could have said that. Oh, I could have done that. Oh, I know that. So I think it's time for me to share that. There's no point sitting on the fence going, oh yeah, I know that. No, if you know it, get out there and share it. So that's where my focus is now, really. And I will share that through teaching and through writing and through any other medium, really. Getting the name out there, getting me out there, so that people can tap into all of this wisdom, all in one place.
So would you like to leave us with one of your pearls of wisdom?
Oh my goodness. That's
Just one.
difficult. Just one pearl of wisdom. I think our life is the greatest gift we've ever been given. We don't always see it that way. And so make it your greatest creation.
Thank you. I truly resonate with that. On my website, it's like, your life is a work of art. Now go out and create it.
There you go.
And yes, thank you so much, Bridget.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me, Juliette. It's been fantastic to catch up with you.
Yeah, I really want to give you a hug now. We have to.
I know, a virtual hug.
Yeah. Thank you to Matt and Ken at Thermalux UK for offering their saunas as a space for me to record my podcast in. Soulful Saunas, stories of self-mastery.